Break check. We're on. We're popping. It's 8 races in, 8 up, 8 down for the Red Bull. Surprise, surprise, Max Verstappen not just taking the checkered flag, but making history in the process. Welcome into the ESPN post-race show.
Nailed it.
I know. I got a little too excited these last couple of weeks. I've been calling it the post-show race.
Rolls me off the tongue.
I'm ready to run. Gary Striewski, Dalen Cuff here in our Bristol Studio E lounge. We also got Spencer Hall, Katie George, Laurence Edmondson joining us from far and away to break down everything that we just saw from the Lance Stroll Grand Prix up there in Montreal, the Canadian Grand Prix, race 8 of 22 in this now season. And Laurence, we mentioned the history, 41 wins for now Max Verstappen, 100 wins as a collective for this Red Bull team, tying now Ayrton Senna for 5th most all-time in F1 history. Laurence, if you can help us put this into context for Max and for Red Bull.
Well, for Red Bull, it's huge. The team started off in 2005. Everyone didn't really take them seriously when they first came into the sport. They thought they were just an energy drinks company. And here they are, 100 victories, absolutely dominating the sport this year. No one can get close to them. And for Max Verstappen, I think for any driver, Ayrton Senna is an important milestone because he is often considered the top driver ever to have raced in Formula One. Of course, he died on track in 1994 at the Grand Prix in Imola, and so his career was cut short. So anyone who surpasses 41 victories in Formula One, it's a big deal. We've seen drivers get emotional about it. Max is a slightly younger generation, so he wouldn't have grown up watching Ayrton, but I think it's still a big moment in his career too.
Katie, you talk about young drivers, excellent drivers, of course, now tied with the late, great Ayrton Senna, but for Max, just 25 years young, 7 years now as a professional driver. He's barely scratching the surface on what he can do, and he's already done so much.
And he's not even being pushed, right? I mean, and that's just a credit to Red Bull and what they've been able to do, putting together this incredible car. But I truly believe, yes, he's the best driver on the grid, but we could even see a different level if he was being pushed by those behind him. And Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin, as well as Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton, they made good strides today, more consistent strides, and that's what we all want to see. But there's still such a large gap, and I just wonder if it was a little bit more competitive top to bottom, and he wasn't out there all alone so often, if we would see Max Verstappen rise to an even higher level. And that's just, I mean, crazy to even wrap your mind around, because he is lights out right now, just competing at such a remarkable level and standard. I often wonder if he gets bored out there. He hit the sausage late in the race, and he started laughing with his race engineer. And I wonder sometimes, not that he's going to sleep at the wheel, but gosh, he wants to have a little bit of excitement, and right now he's just not getting it because he's so far out in front.
Before the race, Martin Brundle, I was talking to him, and he said Alonso's been really hyped up a little bit, thinks it's going to be a competitive race. He said he hopes so. He essentially summed up the paraphrase. He goes, he hopes so. Like, he is not being pushed. And you asked that question, there's that famous John Wooden quote, perform at your best when your best is required. Your best is required every day.
Sure.
Not for Max Verstappen. It absolutely is not. This is an engineering marvel the car is. He's the best driver in the world, and he's coasting by and large, unfortunately, to the chagrin of all of us. But he's that good, but the vehicle also is outstanding, and he just masters it.
Spencer, when we saw the lights go out, we almost saw a little bit of excitement because Lewis Hamilton leapfrogged Fernando Alonso, and we were like, oh, we're racing today. And then, well, that was short-lived because, of course, Max Verstappen for the 3rd consecutive race went wire to wire from lights out to the checkered flag. But to be expected.
To be expected on 2 different levels. I like what Laurence did in putting this in historical context for what Red Bull has done as a team. This is the 2nd great era of Red Bull in just a span of under 2 decades, which is incredible because, yeah, they did get dominated like everyone else did, albeit by a tighter gap than we're seeing between Verstappen and the crowd here, when Mercedes got their package right and had a run of dominance under Hamilton. But they bounced back from that and are now in a 2nd era of greatness, which is astonishing for a team that's this young, and is a testament to the commitment of ownership and the brilliance of the engineering team that they have there. It's also a testament when we show those, yes, catching Ayrton Senna at 41, when we show all those drivers there, that means a lot because Ayrton Senna is this big holy of holies. Ayrton Senna is the driver who, makes atheists believe that there is a God and he loves F1. That is Ayrton Senna. there is a driver above them, if you notice, by the way, who races for whom? Red Bull. He's chasing Vettel now, and Alan Prost. Those are the people who he's now a peer of. That's nuts at this age to be 25. It makes me think that the only thing that could really slow Verstappen down when you're talking about what he's chasing, does he get distracted? If he quit at 30 to just say, hey man, I'm going to be a gamer. I'm just going to stream Fortnite all day or whatever we're going to play in 5 years. I wouldn't blame him, because at this point, if he continues to perform at this level of dominance, he will have nothing left to prove, nothing whatsoever. But I will say this, because I enjoy being the person who brings bad news on this show. These things don't last for long. They don't last for long. And this dominance that we're seeing, you should treasure it now, note it, document it, because inevitably something comes along to change the circumstances that we're looking at. And it's usually in the form of human on human conflict. Egos, they matter.
Sure, and he is under contract with Red Bull through 2028. If we can pop up that graphic for the most wins in Formula One history all time, Lawrence, I want to get your thoughts, actually the collective's thoughts on this, because now with 14 races to go, tied with Ayrton Senna, but Alain Prost right now 10 wins away now for Verstappen. Not outside the realm of possibility that Verstappen could go from tied for 5th to sole possession of 3rd. Leapfrogging Sebastian Vettel. Of course, he's not going to catch Schumacher or Lewis Hamilton this year or maybe in the next couple of years. But with 14 races left and only 12 behind Vettel, I was asking our betting guy, Dalen, I'm like, what are the futures on this? What is Vegas giving him the odds of doing? Because he's won every single race, no, not every single race, rather, the majority of races this year. Vegas has to like his chances.
I'm sure they do, and I should do some research on this. It's not on some of our partners' books that we look at with ESPN, so I don't know in terms of that actual bet, but I'm sure somebody's out there putting action on that. And I don't know about you, Lawrence, but I wouldn't necessarily bet against it for him to go 13 out of 14 and find a way to at least 13 out of 14. Give him one mistake, if you will, and find his way past Vettel.
That's very possible. And the only guy, remember, who's beaten him so far this year is his teammate Sergio Perez. And we'll get on to talking about him a little bit later on, I'm sure, but he is not looking great at the moment. And these things just spiral upwards or downwards. So for Max, it feels like it's spiraling upwards. He's just going to get better and better and better at the moment. The confidence is so high. As Katie said, he's laughing about mistakes midway through a race, which could have put him in the wall. You know, he just shrugs it off, laughs it off. And yeah, if you look at where he is in his career, how young he is, all of those records on that list are well within his ability to get it. And but this is a time where he makes difference in the record books, because when you have a car this dominant, if you can build up 10 plus, 13 plus, 14 plus victories a year, that's where you really start to eat into these records. I would say, however, these records are slightly misleading, because back in the day, there were fewer races in a season. There was a lot more unreliability. So it wasn't just down to driver skill. You were also relying on everything holding together. But even so, if he gets up there with Lewis Hamilton on 103, and Lewis was asked about this on Thursday ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix, are you worried about Max beating your record? And he said, look, it looks like it's going to happen. You know, he's hoping to get back in a car, Lewis, where he can win races as well and extend his lead. But he's pretty, you know, he's looking at it like everyone else and thinking, this guy's 25. If he wants to, he can take every record going.
A record 23 races were on the book for this F1 season. Of course, Imola didn't happen due to the flooding, so 22 races will be done this year, barring any other unforeseen circumstance going forward. Stefano Domenicali recently said he would like to see potentially 24 races. So you do the math here. Max Verstappen is winning the better part of 50% of these races. It might not be that many more than a handful of years, Katie George, until we see maybe Max Verstappen get to 103, get to 104 before his Red Bull contract's over with. And then, like Spencer was mentioning, he's going to get into the sim world.
Get on the sticks, baby.
Yeah, man. He's going to go do the driving that's not dangerous inside his house with internet connection.
I'm not a mathematician, but I think he could easily get there by 2028 when his contract is up with Red Bull. The question is, if he's not there already at that point, do we see Max Verstappen walk away from the sport? I mean, he's accomplished a great deal already. He doesn't seem to be somebody who's chasing 8 world championships, you know, to become the best of the best, right? He doesn't seem motivated by that. He's obviously certainly competitive in nature. We know that. We've documented that after these races on this show. But I don't know if you could say that racing is his ultimate passion or one true love. You guys are joking about the Sims. He genuinely is passionate about that, and he wants to have a future in it. I think the only way that Max Verstappen doesn't surpass Lewis Hamilton, given his age and the way that he performs already in his young career, is if he's not around in the sport to complete it.
Spencer, do you see that sort of, I hate to use the word boredom set in, but he did have that exclusive with Sky Sports, and now we're kind of pivoting to the the downside. What does this sport look like with Max Verstappen not in it? Because he alluded to it in that exclusive ahead of Monaco that, hey, listen, he likes watching those Porsche GT3s go around the track. He's interested at using that Le Mans sort of circuit when he's still in his peak physical performance to maybe go explore some of those things. So what would an F1 race day look like without a Max Verstappen? Of course, it's not going to happen anytime in the near future, but he's kind of floated that idea.
I think he's just mad that Ferrari won something. In Le Mans, Ferrari won. Verstappen saw that and he's furious. He just can't tolerate it. It doesn't make sense given the world he lives in. So he's just going to go over there and beat them at the 24 hours of Le Mans. By the way, how much would it suck if you're in a video game lobby? You're having a nice night Saturday, got your driving rig set up, and you go in the lobby and Max Verstappen is waiting there to race in your group. No, I don't want that. No,
he's like, all right, boys, get on the sticks. I'm ready.
Wait, if you're gonna lose to the best. I'm okay with that. But to stick to the video game thing real quick. Whether it was playing FIFA or younger years, Madden, whatever it was, if you're trouncing the competition, you would turn up the level to go from intermediate to pro to world class.
Yes, true.
He's right now stuck in a world where he's stuck in pro, and I don't think he really wants that. I think he wants to be challenged. And to Katie's point, I think you do get bored. Like it's such a good car, and he's so exceptional. What'll relight his fire will be if he's challenged, and I do think the sport needs not just him to be challenged. They need a little bit of the Max that was a prick in the beginning of Drive to Survive that got some of us to become a fan of him. I don't know if that says about me, but like I was attracted to that element of that. You need a bit of a heel. He's such a great winner right now. He's so gracious and magnanimous and dominating that you're actually not hating him as much as you probably would need to have that person out front create like some vitriol and a desire to watch. So there's a lot going on here, but I do think he needs to be challenged, and it'll help the sport, and it'll help just a day-to-day entertainment.
F1 has a Max Verstappen problem in the best way possible. He is so good. He does put
Stop being so nice, Max.
In seats, and it is what it is. But alluding to that interview with Sky Sports, Lawrence, and then we'll move on to Checo and, of course, his teammate. Any credence to that? Because he did mention the Ferraris, but also he did say, listen, this guy's a winner. He wants to remain at the top. He said, as long as I'm in the fastest car, you don't got to worry about me going anywhere. He's in the fastest car. I don't think we got to worry about him going anywhere for now.
I think so. He's got a contract through to the end of 2028 as well. And I think he absolutely intends to see that through. But I remember Lewis Hamilton being asked questions about his future at a similar stage of his career. And he almost could not imagine himself driving beyond the age of about 32, 33 back then. He said, got so many things I want to do with my life. I'm not going to hang around in this sport with you lot. I'm going to go off and do that. And here he is at 38 on the brink of signing a brand new contract that will probably take him into his 40s. So these things do have a way of creeping up and kind of keeping them interested. And if anything, I think I absolutely agree. What Max needs is a bit of competition. He actually needs Red Bull to kind of drop the ball a little bit further down the line. Not immediately, obviously, but if he's looking to extend his career, he'll want the challenge. He'll want something else. Otherwise, he'll probably go looking. Yeah, and I think Le Mans is something he wants to do. He's actually talked about doing that with his father, Jos Verstappen, in the past. Jos isn't getting any younger. I mean, Max is still very young, but Jos isn't. So if they're going to do that together, which would be amazing, they'll have to do it soon. But also, Max is now at a point now where he kind of thinks he can probably just take a weekend off, go and do Le Mans. We saw Fernando combine Le Mans with Fernando Alonso combine Le Mans with F1. So, if he's looking that competitive in a couple of years' time, maybe he'll just like slide in a little Le Mans 24 hours there between races, and away goes with which would be part 2 of a Triple Crown. Of course, there's the Indy 500 to complete that. So you never know. But I think at the moment he's just loving life at the moment, enjoying the victories as they come, as he should. But I think further down the line, he'll want a bit of competition again.
I am so glad that you brought up the competition that Max Verstappen needs, because we saw it early on in the season from his garage mate. And you also mentioned, hey, take a couple of weeks off. Shout out to our researchers, Darren Ayotte, manning the helm, who gave us this fun nugget. Max Verstappen can take the next 2 to 3 races off completely. Checo
now it's 3 because it's today.
Yeah, 2 or 3. Checo could win the next 2 or 3. and Max will still be the leader in constructors for drivers' points. It's ridiculous. But just a couple of weeks ago, Katie George, we were saying, is Max Verstappen seat two in the Red Bull garage, which in retrospect kind of seems silly now with the absolute dominance. He's won wire to wire 3 straight races, but it was Checo who was the one lighting the fire for Max. And now he's in a bit of a tailspin, and this started all the way back in qualifying. What gives with Checo, Katie?
Yeah, I think we were hyping that narrative out of desperation,
yeah,
right?
We actually needed that. Yeah, we needed that. We needed that.
Yeah.
Bit forced.
We were hyping it, and it was in a good place early on in the season. And Checo Perez was honest about it. He doesn't feel like he's in great form at the moment. The last 3 races, he has not gotten to Q3 on the Saturdays leading into the Grand Prix. Now, I will say, I give him a pass on this weekend because the rain on Saturday, I don't know about you guys, I was on the edge of my seat. I found it to be so exciting because the tire management was bonkers. And obviously Alex Albon, who I know we'll hit on later in the show, he capitalized going into Q2 by coming out on slicks. And I just felt like Sergio Perez was always a couple seconds late in the decisions, not just himself, but as a team, they got it wrong. And I don't think that that's his fault. I mean, they were managing a lot. It was raining hard, and then it wasn't. And then it was misting, and then the track looked like it was drying up, and then the rain came back. And so I feel for him that he wasn't able to get to Q3, and he started P12. Now, obviously, he made good on it, getting into the points in P6 today. But he's got to qualify better. In Monaco, he had the crash. He was not up to par. In Spain, he's got to be better because the expectation, given the car that we have alluded to with Max Verstappen's brilliance, you are expected to finish P2 behind your teammate in every single race. He's not able to do that because of his qualifying. So hopefully we see him find his rhythm again. He's making good on it come Sunday, but he's got to be better. And Lawrence, we talked about this on Unlapped a little bit earlier on in the week. We talked about possibilities of drivers not being in the seats come 2024. Based on what you've seen from Checo in the last couple of weeks, would you say that seat is getting a little hotter?
You can look at it 2 ways. So obviously he's not performing as well as he should. I think he's only now 7 or 8 points ahead of Fernando Alonso in the championship, which is pretty crazy when you consider how good that Red Bull is. The Aston Martin's a good car as well, but to have Alonso that close to him. But you can look at it in the way where he's underperforming, so maybe he'll get booted out. You look at it the other way, and it actually makes life very easy for Red Bull. Christian Horner would have a much bigger headache, believe it or not, right now, if Perez was ahead of Verstappen in the championship or the 2 of them were battling, because he'd then have to manage that relationship. So often the best number 2 drivers are the guys who are there or thereabouts, when you've got a dominant car. They take second in the championship. I think that is crucial for Perez this year. But if they don't create a huge amount of issue for your number 1 driver, away you go. And one of the biggest controversies last year for Red Bull, despite a remarkably successful season, came at the end of the year when Verstappen refused to let Perez through in Brazil to give him some points towards that second place in the championship. And that all went back to the Monaco Grand Prix, where Verstappen felt that Perez had crashed on purpose. So the less controversy they have, in some ways, the easier it is for Red Bull just to cruise along and take championships and put everything behind Max. So you can look at it both ways. But I think if Checo is serious about extending his contract beyond the end of 2024, which is where it currently expires, he does need to up his game, because Red Bull will start looking around. And of course, we keep mentioning it, and it's one of the reasons that we keep talking about Perez's future. Daniel Ricciardo is sat there. Actually sat there on ESPN 2 this weekend, but he sat there the rest of the time just looking at Checo struggling, thinking, I could probably do a better job. And he's in the car in Silverstone, so not too far away. He's going to do a tyre test, I think, after the British Grand Prix. So he's going to be in there, he's going to show them what he can do. And if they look at that and they think, actually, Daniel Ricciardo is that bit quicker. And Red Bull have a few concerns about how much their penalty for exceeding the cost cap is going to affect them going into next year. If they're starting to worry genuinely about the competitiveness of Checo Perez, they do have someone there ready to take on the role.
Well, Danny Ricciardo is going to need a couple of weeks, because in that simulcast with Will Arnett, he was eating a bunch of poutine and
he was
drinking some maple syrup. So he's going to need a couple of weeks to get back to the training table if he's going to fit in the cockpit of one of those F1 Red Bulls.
If they offered him that second seat, he wouldn't eat for 4 days. He would just shut it down.
He's like, all right, well, ESPN, it's been real. We've been able to call him a colleague for 4 days so far. Speaking of being the heel, Dalen and Spencer, I want to get your take on this because it was Max after quali saying this about everything in encapsulation. Well, if I hadn't been there, it would have looked very different. This on the quali, different for Red Bull. I wouldn't be happy with not making Q3 3 times in a row. Checo. I'm not concerned about it either. I'm busy enough on my side getting everything in order. So knowing what we know about Max, and you said it, he's a bit prickly. He is sort of the heel. But these comments aren't unfamiliar with what we know about Max and how he's just like, if that ruffles your feathers, sorry about it.
I think if he actually was under threat still, if it was the point situation from 3
Sure.
or 4 weeks ago, that quote is very different. That quote is not the same. He may be taking more of a shot at his teammate and more directly to affect that person's confidence. This is kind of, I think it was a little prickly, but just being nice. My guy's going through it right now. It is Father's Day. My pops used to always say, live up to or down to your expectations. The expectations for Max are always sky high. Right now, I feel like Checo he wants it to be good. I don't know if he expects results right now, like especially in his qualifications. He's not driving like a confident driver. He's not talking like one right now. And it just seems like it's not just, as you guys mentioned before, it's not just being Max's teammate. You do have the best machine available.
Correct.
So when you have all those tools and you can't perform, that is seeping his confidence and his expectations.
Spencer, all that to say, Checo did start on the outside of the points looking in to start this race, but he was able to register 6th place finish. So confidence at least was there enough to get points, to get in that point column for the Red Bull.
Yeah, it feels weird to sit here and question Checo's confidence given the fact that he's one of 20 drivers in the world who gets to do this, and among those 20, most regard him as being, top tier among those. That seems really odd to me. For Verstappen's remarks, I would like to go out on the limb of quoting Ted Lasso and just say he's not rude, he's just being Dutch. That's all. There may be a little bit of a barb in there, but I also think that that's simply how Max says things, The only part of that quote I have any issue with is when he says, I'm busy enough getting everything together on my side of things. No, you're not, man. You can eat a sandwich and drive. I mean, literally,
Yeah,
you can
that's
eat a
true.
sandwich and drive. You could do the Ricky Bobby thing and put a big Fig Newton sticker over your helmet, all right, and talk about how this was obviously a road hazard, but he does love them. That he could do that. That's how good they are at this point. Could he do that next year? Actually, I think he could do that next year, too. It feels like a 2-year deal here. But for Checo, he is getting more confident. He has to ask himself the question that I think we can call the Valtteri Bottas question, which is, are you okay being the mascot on a developing team? That's what happens if you leave, right? Because Checo's not going to find a car that's more competitive than this one. So are you fine going off and being a pioneer on the frontier of a team trying to find improvement? Or do you like things in that big, cozy Red Bull stall? We've all seen it in the paddock, buddy. You might want to stay there. It's a nice spot.
Sure.
I don't know if that'll be his question. I mean, that's as we said. That may not be his decision in the end, though.
Sure.
I mean, Horner was even saying before this race, like, we need him to get a result for him, for his mental, his mentality, more so than the actual points race. But it's essentially a wrap.
Talking about confidence and comfy stalls, you got to see a lot of confidence right now from the Silver Arrows. Katie, George Russell retired after lap 56. We're going to get to that in a second. But this after a double podium finish last week, and Lewis Hamilton straight out of the gates overtaken second, of course, finished in third. But do you like overall the changes we've seen from Mercedes these last couple of weeks really have turned into really, really good, really competitive racing when their cars can stay on track?
For sure. I think for Mercedes fans, they were just hoping for consistency, right? They were going to be able to build off the momentum that we clearly saw from the upgrades in Spain. I think that they were able to do that. Obviously, George Russell goes into the barrier early on. He's able to fix his car, get back out there, actually gets up into the points until he has a braking issue, and then he has to retire on lap 56. So that certainly was bad luck. George not capitalizing on the car being in a good spot. I think that they're making strides and they'll continue to make strides. The fact of the matter is Aston Martin also brought upgrades this weekend and they made strides and they clearly had the pace as we watched Alonso and Lewis Hamilton go back and forth dueling for second and third, which I thought was an exciting part of the race. I was hopeful in the last 6 or 7 laps that we were going to see Lewis Hamilton close in on Alonso and make something of it. But Alonso was able to just continue to widen that gap and finish in P2. But I think that Mercedes has to feel good about where they are. They're finally making progress. Lawrence has taught me that their car currently does not favor low-speed corners. So this was never going to be a track that we saw ultimate pace from the Mercedes. But to be able to finish on the podium as Lewis Hamilton did, I think that's a win for the weekend, and they'll continue to progress as we move forward.
Yeah, Lawrence Mercedes now in second place in the Constructors, of course, far behind Red Bull, but they're at 167 combined team points over Aston Martin, who they leapfrogged just last week, who's currently sitting at 154. Is this what you expected with the budget, with the leadership, with the drivers of Mercedes to make a quick turnaround when they did finally dedicate themselves to actually making changes to the car?
Well, I think if you look at where Mercedes should be overall, this is still underperforming.
Sure.
You know, they should be challenging Red Bull for the championship. But when we take in consideration where they started the season, where they are now is about as much as they could have hoped for. The important thing about this upgrade is it is about performance on the track at the moment. Of course it is. But it's also about finding a development direction going into next year. If you talk to people at the team at the moment, they're saying, yes, of course, you know, we'd like to be able to race for victories at the end of this year. But the real objective is to make sure they start next season with a car capable of fighting for wins and eventually the championship. Now, they've made some big changes, some big conceptual changes to their car, but they've also been limited about how much they can do under the budget cap. So in previous iterations of Formula One, back, you know, a couple of decades, rewind, and you would have a huge amount of money you could just throw at the car. They probably would have completely changed the chassis of the car, but they can't do that now. So they've changed the bits that they think will give them the best understanding of this new direction going forward. They're going to learn from that. They're going to try and add as much performance as they can over the rest of this season. But really, it's those lessons that they get from these changes that they then bake into next year's car, which will be the true test of whether this Mercedes team is coming back to where they really should be, given their history, their recent history, and also given the budget and the facilities they have. And of course, the two drivers they have, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, are two drivers that should be challenging for championships. So yeah, that's where they are right now. But it's certainly a good step. As Katie said, this was not a track they were expecting to be quicker. So to get a podium and to be challenging Aston Martin, it's a track that definitely suits the Aston Martin, is a good thing for them. But yeah, it's really a case of just setting themselves up, getting a platform for next year.
I wonder if they will be a little bit saddened, though, because just to be contrarian, I mean, you had George Russell was one mistake, and he put his car in the wall, and then he gets himself back to, I think he was eighth when he had to retire. So I mean, he had a good race outside of that one mistake, and obviously qualified well in fourth, and you had a chance to have your two drivers again competing for top 5 spots. Whereas when you look at your competition in Aston Martin, I think they're 13 points ahead now or so in the Constructors' Championship. They're racing with one guy that's going to finish in the points in the top 5 every time, it seems, and Alonso, and another, and Lance Stroll, that may not get in the points. And today I think he finished P12. So they're racing one hand behind their back over on Aston Martin, and if you can capitalize that every time having two guys in the points, so I think you look at this race and think, we were one mistake away from having another big day.
Fernando Alonso, another podium for him, says it's going to be podiums for him in his Aston Martin from here on out. How much credence do we give that, Spencer?
I think podiums is a very carefully chosen word there, because I know Alonso would like to win. We don't get to do that unless we are Max Verstappen in the year 2023. I think they have good reason to feel like, yeah, podiums are capable and possible down the line until the end of the 2023 season, because they've just been that consistent with Alonso, right? The only question for Aston Martin in terms of reliability is Lance Stroll, who does seem to be sort of having, you know, another back and forth kind of season with flashes of improvement here and there. Alonso is as bankable as anything not named Max right now. He's third, he's second, he's fourth. He's going to be right there. I know a lot of that has come out of the potential gains that Mercedes could make in the second half of the season. I am skeptical of upgrades. I know upgrades make your car slightly better. Aston Martin has upgrades too. I think this is what you're going to see. I think Alonso is going to end up having a really nice late career year out of the fact that Mercedes missed on the car and had to scramble for most of this year. That's all Alonso's benefit. So yes, given the circumstances as they are, I feel really good about saying, yeah, bank him third. Like in Dalen's world, you would just say, if I could take a blanket average bet and say third for the rest of the year, pencil him in.
Good money.
I love the podium finishes for him. Early they were capitalizing. They were plus money. Now they're all, he is heavily favored to finish on the podium every single week. The odds makers have caught up to that. There is no value. You have to pair him with somebody else. Alonso and Verstappen got you to about even money today. So that was not somebody, him and Hamilton got you to even money today. So that paid out pretty well.
You're not going to get those type of bets for these next crop of drivers that we're going to talk about, but we do have some movement in the standings at the very bottom. We have a new number 10 in the Constructors, and that's because Williams has now leapfrogged AlphaTauri. They had a singular point, but thanks to Alex Albon's 7th place finish, it's Williams with 7 points. But in all seriousness, Katie, we saw some really nice driving. Logan Sargent retired before I think any of us could even get settled in our seats. But Alex Albon continues to carry the torch. Dalen kind of mentioned it. Some of these teams driving with one arm behind their back, and it seems Williams, that's the case for them. But Alex, he's driving well.
Yeah, he is. I was really impressed with him over the entire weekend. As I mentioned earlier, he was the one that gambled with Williams on Saturday during qualies going into Q2. He went out immediately on slicks, and it proved to be the right call. And then everybody else was scrambling because he was putting in an unbelievable lap time, and he actually finished P1 going into Q3, and obviously that changed. But he put together a great Saturday, and then he put together a great Sunday as well. I think it was lap 59 when Ted Kravitz reported in, like, Albon's tires are going. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to last. And yet he did. He was able to keep all those drivers behind him at bay, and he pushed those tires to the absolute limit to finish in the points for his team. You know, we talk about George Russell in his days at Williams kind of making the most of that car and proving that he was better than that car and could make the most of it. He then obviously gets an opportunity to go on to Mercedes. I think Alex Albon is a really good driver, and I like what he's done for Williams. I hope we see him in the future in a different seat and in an even better car, because I think he has a lot of potential, and he proved that today.
Driving for Williams, driving well for Williams. Spencer, this is the opportunity in the show that we have sectioned off for you to now give praise from Williams to now let's go to Alfa Romeo. Terry Bodas, he has the floor. He registered a point.
Registered a point, earned a point. Don't make it sound like paperwork, Gary.
My bad.
Earned.
He fought for that
Conquered a point. That's right. I know I called him a mascot for the Alfa Romeo team earlier. That may be uncharitable, but it's not necessarily inaccurate. It's been a mostly down year for Valtteri Bottas and the Alfa team. And for them to reach up and grab a point here at this circuit and engage in some of the only real interesting one-on-one head-to-head racing that we saw on the circuit, congrats to them. Congrats to the man who has a souvenir helmet and cap for every destination. I love that Bottas has decided, in addition to just having fun at Alpha, he is going to become a merch king on that hustle, on that grind. Congratulations to our own Terry Bodas.
First thing I think of when I think of Canada is beavers and lumberjacks, and that's why it was
Every
on his
Canadian
helmet.
here wants to hit you right now. That's good.
I guess. All right, let's move up closer to the front of the pack here, which is maybe not what we expected from both of the Ferraris again, and due to maybe some impediments from quality, they had to set back a little bit and take a couple of penalties. But both Ferraris finishing in 4 and 5, and Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz 4-5. Lawrence, do we expect this from Ferrari? Because they've sort of been the butt end of all of our jokes, whether it be mechanical or driver. We obviously saw the disgruntlement both drivers felt with tire selection and management going into this race. All that to say, pretty decent showing from them.
Yeah, I think it was one of the top strategies of the race to not pit when there was a temptation to do it, and not even to split the strategy. Usually when you see a team faced with a difficult decision, they'll pit one driver and not pit the other. They stuck to their guns, they kept them both out there, and it worked perfectly. It moved them up the order. They managed their tyres well, which is not something we've been able to say about Ferrari at any point this year, and they reaped the reward. Now, again, a bit like I was talking about Mercedes earlier, Ferrari finishing 4th and 5th with 3 different teams ahead of them is not really where Ferrari should be or where they want to be. But given what's happened this season and given all the stick that we usually give them every time they mess up a strategy call, this was quite refreshing to see. But it follows on from a pretty tricky qualifying day for both drivers. And so, they really desperately needed this one.
It's funny that, the 4 and 5 were over here celebrating. Like, we're raving pom-poms for this performance just based on the fact that you assume, because Saturday was a debacle again, no communication with Sainz to let him know there's drivers behind him, and he gets an impeding grid penalty. But the fact that this call was made middle of the race, and given their history, I was like, this is going to blow up. This is going to be a complete train wreck. I just assumed it kind of had to be, because they made it, it wasn't going to work out. As you saw the race unfold, I was like, okay, this could be exactly what they hoped for. And to Lawrence's point, stuck to their guns, both drivers, and essentially the same type of strategy, and it played out for them. So we have to give them, I hate the term everybody uses now, give them their flowers for a minute, but those flowers are for 4th and 5th place, which they don't really want, but where they started and their history right now, pretty good.
And Katie, we're starting to see sort of these drivers take matters into their own hands, blowing through stop signs, so to speak, when they're getting orders, whether to pit or swap tires or just race management in general. I mean, is this sort of what we're going to have to see them be more aggressive and sort of feel out their own drives to get these finishes and better?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Early on in the race, Carlos Sainz was told to box, and he kind of pushed back on that and said, no, I want to stay out. And that proved to be the right decision. Now, we rewind to Saturday, and Charles Leclerc obviously wanted to go to slicks pretty quickly. And his race engineer, team engineer said, no, we are going to stay on the intermediates. There's more rain in the horizon. And that obviously proved to be the wrong call. And he wasn't able to make it into Q3. And he started, I believe, P12, P11, somewhere back there, right outside of the top 10. And he made good on it today, certainly. But I think Charles Leclerc has to be a little bit more forceful and recognize that he's the one out there on track. And if he doesn't like what his team is saying, he needs to push back. We see that from Carlos Sainz a little bit more than Charles Leclerc. I feel like Charles, after the races or after qualifications, will voice his frustration. But in the moment, we see Max Verstappen push back and make the ultimate call. We see Lewis Hamilton push back and make the ultimate call from time to time. And those might not be the right calls in those moments, but they believe in what they see out there, and they believe it's the right call in that moment. And I wish Charles Leclerc stuck to his guns a little bit more and put his foot down. And, Nate Saunders has an article on ESPN.com speaking to this. And maybe Charles Leclerc will find that with more experience, more maturity, with age, as you see some of these older guys like a Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton. But I thought it was interesting, Lawrence, during the race, Martin Brundle, who's on commentary, he said, these Ferrari drivers push back sometimes too much. And I'm surprised that they don't listen to their race engineers as much as they should, which I found to be interesting because I kind of believe that Charles Leclerc doesn't push enough. Where do you fall when it comes to the banter back and forth between the drivers and their engineers on the pit wall?
So every team, when they're making these decisions, they have two things available to them. They have all of the information they have, which is all the laps of the other drivers, all the knowledge about the tires, all the simulation, these computers working behind in the background, telling them where they'll end up if they do this strategy, that strategy, or another one. And then they have a very important factor, which is what the driver is saying, what he's actually feeling through his hands, through the inputs he's putting into the wheel. And they've got to combine those two things and come up with a solution. Now, I've always felt like the Ferrari way of doing it is a little bit more ad hoc, and there's a lot of thinking time that goes into it. We often hear we are checking or asking a question to the drivers, and they're not really coming back, and then perhaps making a decision too late. So it seems like something in that process does need to be sharpened up. They did make some quite big changes at the start of this year. They changed their head of strategy, which was a bold call by Fred Vasseur, who came in as the new team principal at the start of this year. But it doesn't seem to have got to the bottom of what the issue is. But to go back to Leclerc's qualifying issue in Q2, actually, if you look at it and you look at what happened to other drivers, there were 3 ways to make it through to Q3, and they were all possible. And his one, which was changing to soft tires when he did, his teammate, Carlos Sainz, made that work. So in fact, when you actually go a bit deeper into it, part of it was Leclerc just not doing a good enough job in that moment. They were very tricky conditions, but some drivers stayed out longer on intermediates. They made it through. Alex Albon took the really risky route of putting on soft straight away and going out there. Of course, he set the fastest time in Q2. That was the best option in hindsight, but it had a huge amount of risk involved, a huge amount of risk that Ferrari obviously were not willing to take because their car is quick. So I don't know. I think they're going to sit down and all look at it, and they'll realize that there was mistakes from both sides. And really, it is just sharpening up that communication between the two. I think there just needs to be a bit of a overhaul of the way they make decisions in races and the way they're going about it. Ideally, they'll poach somebody from another team to come in and tell them how they do it. Maybe Red Bull, they seem to be very sharp in these things, or Mercedes, and try and bring someone in that way.
Lawrence made a good point, though. I feel a lot of times they're asking questions that don't seem like you have to have confidence and trust in some of those, and trust for sure, but confidence in some of those situations. A lot of times you're asking questions of your driver, what's going on out there. I feel like sometimes they're asking a question like, we're going to figure it out. We'll take a look. We'll see what happens. And if you're behind the wheel of a rocket ship, that doesn't make me feel great.
Somebody will get back to you. Nobody, for all intents and purposes, though, from Ferrari in any sort of, let's say, doghouse. With that, it's time to bring in one of your favorite segments from the Unlapped podcast with Katie, Nate, and Lawrence. It is the Doghouse. Who finds themselves in the doghouse after this running of the Canadian Grand Prix? Dalen, who are you putting in your doghouse?
Unfortunately, I like the team. I love Gunther Steiner, but it is Haas.
No!
I mean, you have Hulkenberg.
Come on, man.
It wasn't just that he started P2. He qualified P2.
It wasn't his fault.
I think it's a justifiable situation to get a three
there was too much
spot grid penalty.
I wouldn't have seen it either.
10 if precedence and whatnot. But it wasn't just that. It was right away through the racing wasn't good, and early on, first 30 laps or so, there were multiple DRS trains caused by the Haas's at all points in time. They just did not have race pace and backed up the race at different times when the strategy day was not good, and I believe they both finished in the bottom 4 or 5 spots. So it was not an impressive day by Haas all around, given a lot of optimism going into this morning.
You call it race pace, I call it race strategy. Slow everybody else down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, park behind me.
Katie, who's in your doghouse?
Did you say me, or are you going to Lawrence?
No, Katie.
Because I don't want to steal Lawrence. Okay. I'm going to go with Nick DeVries, and this is a driver that I've been hopeful for. Obviously, he was taken to task, allegedly, that he needed to put together results and start performing better. He locks up on lap 36, I believe, kind of takes Kevin Magnussen with him in that moment. It looked like a really dangerous situation. We might have gotten a safety car. Now, I will say, both drivers did a really nice job in that moment, reversing cleanly out of it and getting back on track, so kudos to them. But Nick DeVries in that moment, it's just another kind of rookie mistake that you just hope you don't see, especially when you're comparing him to an Oscar Piastri, who didn't end up in the points, but I thought drove extremely well today.
Oh, Oscar Piastri. This is a little bit of a teaser, but he might be one of 2 people ending up in my doghouse. For the time being, Spencer, who is in yours?
Alpine, and not because they didn't perform well on the track, but because Esteban Ocon, after making it into the points in his 4th race in a row, had to finish with a car that looked like it was going to fall apart.
Yeah.
All right? Give that man a machine worth driving, because I can't have the same kind of confidence when it looks like my car is twerking down the home stretch.
Every time they cut to the Alpine, I was like, something is going to fall off this car. Immediately, it's going to cause the debris to come out. Everybody's going to have to slow down. Lawrence, who is in your doghouse?
For me, it's got to be George Russell. The difference between end result and potential was the biggest there was. You know, he could have easily finished 4th behind Lewis Hamilton, maybe even challenged Lewis for a podium, got in that battle with Fernando Alonso, but that hit with the wall on lap 12, damaged the car, dropped him down the order, and then, of course, he retired with an issue which may or may not be related to the hit, but I suspect it probably was.
It was so funny because we were all collectively on our pre-show call, and George Russell had just retired, and it was dead silence over the broadcast, and we all just heard George Russell go, "Oh, I'm sorry about that." And we all collectively were like, "Aw." We felt terrible for George Russell. All right, I'll round things out. In my doghouse, I'm going to follow Spencer's lead in putting the entirety of the McLaren team, not the Aston Martin. Aston Martin was initially in my doghouse, but
late changes.
The entirety of the McLaren. Yeah, I gave him my doghouse pick as soon as Lewis passed Fernando, and I was like, oh, what the hell? And now Lance Stroll's going to finish out of the points, but both of those guys.
But you put your doghouse pick within 18 seconds of the race starting?
Premature.
I'm a quick texter. All right, I'm a quick texter. Dave, our producer, texted me, and I was like, boom, this makes perfect sense. But then we take a look at what happened with McLaren. Both of their drivers in Piastri and Lando Norris starting inside the top 10. I'm like, all right, at least half of these guys have to record a point for McLaren. Neither of these guys finished in the top 10. So for that, McLaren in my doghouse. Bump, bump, bump. Quick pivot. with that, we're going to go to power rankings. So after what we've seen from the 8th official race this season, let's rank teams bottom to top. Listen, top team going to be Red Bull. Shocker, shocker. Yeah. No surprise. But Lawrence, let's start with you. Doesn't necessarily have to be as it presently sits in the Constructors, just overall power rankings from what we've seen from teams as a collective. Who would you put in the 10th spot?
I know you say it doesn't have to be linked to what the Constructors are showing at the moment, but I'm going to take the easy way out because AlphaTauri have today dropped to the back of the Constructors standings.
Yep.
And I think the most disappointing thing about this is that they have the same engine, the same gearbox, the same rear suspension as the Red Bull, and yet they are underperforming on a level that just sees them now really among the slowest teams on the grid. You know, Williams have made a big step actually, and probably overtaken them or may overtake them by the end of this year. And I just feel like for a team like AlphaTauri that has a lot of benefits by being a sister team of Red Bull, it's not really good enough.
Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda and of course Nick de Vries, and they're not really helping themselves with getting impediment penalties in qualifying, which Tsunoda was one of a handful of drivers to get one of those. And yeah, maybe you can make up for it if you have a stronger vessel, a powerful car, a better strategy. But AlphaTauri simply didn't, and haven't shown the ability to do that. So the 10 spot, I'm not the judge, jury, or executioner, but I'll allow it. Okay, who's giving us the 9 spot? Let me take a look at the rundown.
Katie.
That would be you,
Me.
Katie.
So I know this is in total of the entire season, but I'm going to allow recency bias to come into play. So I'm not putting Williams in that 9th slot based on Alex Albon's performance today.
Okay.
Everybody stick with me. I'm actually going to put Haas in the 9th spot, sadly, because we were so hopeful, right? Nico Hülkenberg puts together a P2 finish in qualification, gets penalized, starts P5 on the grid today, and then ultimately falls to P15. Haas, you are the number 9th team.
Gosh, that's a tough look. Even though when somebody, Spencer Dalen brought up them being in the doghouse, we were like, oh man, that's not fair. But in the 9th spot, we're like, yeah, that's deserved. Spencer, what about you in the 8-hole?
Oh, I get the easy answer.
Okay.
I get to say Williams.
Sick.
Improves to 8th because everybody else fell behind them. And good job on y'all. And kudos especially to Alex Albon, the driver who hates tires. Like Alex Albon is the most. This is Father's Day, so let me just say, Alex Albon, kudos for you for being the son who's like, I'm not going to do what you say, Dad. I'm not going to change tires. I'm going to take these out. You can hear like 1,000 dads watching the show being like, that's the most dangerous thing. Those things are bald. You need to get them replaced. You probably haven't even checked the oil. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put Williams there. Although I was close to putting another team that I believe is going to come up next because I think they're disappointing as well.
That was my next line. You've been checking the oil in that car?
That's something my dad never said to me.
Okay. He drove a Tesla growing up. I don't know. They don't take oil. 7, Dalen, who you got?
I don't know, Spencer. I think we're going to go with different places here. I've talked about expectations all show, and I'm salty because I had such high expectations. There were higher expectations. There would be a real competition for them in the top 5, or probably being ahead of Alpine. I'm still going to put McLaren there.
Yeah.
I just think relative to where they should be and where they are, they've had some spikes. They brought their upgrades at different times. They've had good performance like Monaco, but overall, where the team should be and the quality of the drivers, I do believe Piastri obviously has been somewhat up and down, but out of the rookies, he's been the best one. And Lando is a very talented driver, but I'm going to put McLaren there because I just think I expected much better through the balance of these 8 races.
We thought they were going to be what? Top 3 at best, maybe top 4.
But this is why power rankings are tough, though, because now by default I put somebody else in 6. It's really probably not 6, but it's okay.
Definitely. Well, I'm going to round things out with the 2 alphas being sort of, I guess, the juxtaposed beta in this situation. Alfa Romeo being in the 6th slot. I was going to go McLaren because I thought you were going to go Alfa Romeo, but Zhou Guanyu not finishing well, even though Terry Bottas did earn a point. I don't see the 5 teams ahead of them having enough of that panache to crack that top 5. So, Lawrence, who do you have starting in our top 5?
Okay, this might be slightly controversial, but I think it's entirely justified. I'm going to say Ferrari. And actually, I may have put them a little bit lower if I've been doing this alone. Because, again, you've got to look at expectations. You've got to look at where they are. The way things have worked out this year, they're not really in the running for the battle for second place. And they started this season. I remember being at their launch in Maranello, at their factory, and they were adamant. This year, we go for championships. Last year, Things didn't go quite our way in the second half of the season, but we're confident we've made the necessary changes. We've improved the reliability. We've worked on the weaknesses of the car. We're going for the championship. And here they are, just a kind of distant fourth. And if you look at the way the three teams behind Red Bull have been developing, Ferrari are starting to fall behind as well. They brought a big update to the Spanish Grand Prix. Hasn't made the impact they wanted. So, yeah, Ferrari in there number 5.
I forgot the expectation factor that we were all supposed to be weighing these teams with, because
I love that pick.
I know. I know. I was
pick,
like,
Lawrence.
damn, he sounds so smart saying all of that stuff. Katie, who do you have at 4?
Well, with Lawrence putting Ferrari in 5, that makes my job very easy. Alpine would be in 4th, and obviously Esteban Ocon cracked into the points today. Pierre Gasly struggled. Not his fault, though, by the way. You have to go back to Saturday and him being impeded, and he didn't even make it into Q2. That was just a disaster for Alpine. It felt really bad for him. Ocon actually was impeded as well, but he was able to make the most of it and still get to Q3. But I think Alpine, on the whole, outside of a couple errors, Australia obviously was a low point for the team. On the whole, has performed well this season. So if we're going to take Ferrari to task, which I am all for, even though they got a good result today, and hopefully that means that they'll progress and find their stride, I think Alpine is definitely at the 4 spot.
How unlucky was Gasly today, too, though? Because he pitted right before that the safety car, and for those of us that were invested in that, I was less than happy.
Invested monetarily, so to speak.
I had a top 10 there. We had great value. And I was like, we're in buckets. Where are we? Oh, no.
Invested emotionally, but more importantly, invested, shall we say, fiscally.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, Spencer. Had they just found the right size deep socket and that the wing wouldn't have been wobbly, they wouldn't have been in your doghouse, Alpine. So at number 4, that's a nice chunk of real estate. Who's at number 3 in your power rankings?
I'm going to go ahead and again deviate from the Constructors' Championship numbers in terms of overall expectations
It's Mercedes
and
or
resources
Aston?
available. I'm going to say number 3 is Mercedes for me. And that's because I agree that they are the best. I think they're the best tandem of drivers, but a team this big and a team this smart with this much money behind it, they should be doing better. All right, I'm going to use Lawrence's logic here, okay? Like, Mercedes is always there's a target on everyone's back. Aston is lapping you at times, okay? That's inexcusable. So I'm going to go ahead and put them at 3rd and make someone's number 2 extra spicy.
Well, my number 2 is
It's like,
Aston Martin.
this is like a white elephant, so you can. I'm gonna allow this.
No, my number 2 is. My number 2 would have been Mercedes. I agree with what you said, Spencer. I really am stuck on the fact that when you have a good car and the improvement that Aston Martin has made, and what they've shown this year has been outstanding. And now the consistency of Fernando is outstanding. I go back still to Lance Stroll. Part of the team is having 2 drivers that can compete at the top level. And right now you see that in Mercedes, and really you see that, you could argue with Red Bull. Most of we talk about Checo, those struggled. They may have the best driver tandem on the grid. So I think I give that a lot of credence. That's why I think the organization is great. Yes, the car is not what they thought it was going to be. So it's tough to really argue with where you put them. But because of how Aston Martin has progressed and the expectations, the hype was they're going to be better, all the investment, and it has turned out that way. It is Father's Day, but if Lawrence ever says, "Hey, if we want to put somebody up," it could be a game changer. It could be a game changer. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if he's ever going to do it, but I find it interesting.
It's not Son's Day. It's not Son's Day.
Sons, you've heard nothing. You've heard nothing.
It's timely. It's topical. It works. All right, we're just rounding the corner here to the finish line of the ESPN post-race show. You've been watching Gary Striewski, Dalen Cuff, Spencer Hall, Katie George, Lawrence Edmondson
Are
breaking
you just
down
skipping
what we
over
just saw.
one? It's like not even worth doing
I
number
already
one?
said.
Do you want to pontificate on Red Bull?
Well, I already said no surprises here.
Real quick, do they go unbeaten?
Okay.
Then? Unbeaten this year? Yes or no?
Unbeaten, like taking first place
First
in
place,
all races?
Red Bull.
No, I mean, give
Clean
me
slate.
the field in that regard. You give me the field in that regard. Do I think Max Verstappen is on a podium? 2 at the very lowest?
Yeah, you're
Yes.
really going on
I
a
know,
limb
listen,
there, bro.
I'm going,
Okay, move
listen,
on.
I'm going out on a limb. Yeah, I get it. But, I mean, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to
I
do?
think Max finishes in the top 10 the rest of your guys. I'll give me a top 10 for every race. Yeah, it works out lovely.
Hey, I said no lower than a P2.
Yeah.
I said
Okay.
no lower than a P2. We're rounding the corner. You just watched the Canadian Grand Prix. They're on another week hiatus before the Austrian Grand Prix at the end of June, first part of July. Before we head out, though, we got to give a quick tip of the cap, all right, to Nate Saunders, who was covering the Canadian Grand Prix, and we saw the rain, we saw the torrential downpour. We need to show you this tweet, because Lawrence or Katie, do you have confirmation that Nate is dry in a place with coverage. There was no rain today, fortunately, but he was out. He didn't have his jacket. All right, our friend Chris tweeted this out. Look at the rain coming down. Nate had to walk himself back to wherever he had to walk himself with no umbrella, no rain
British.
protection.
Lawrence, aren't you guys? What's going on here? Don't you have to have equipment?
Yeah, that's not
Aren't
like
you
One thing I
accustomed to
can
that,
confirm
Lawrence?
about Nate.
he said. I'm not
One thing I
concerned
can
about
confirm
that.
about Nate is that he is the most forgetful person I have ever worked with, possibly ever known, which can be very, very frustrating at times. But no, this story doesn't surprise me at all. But you know, he's also one of those people that just gets on with it. If he got soaking wet walking from the car park to the media center, yeah, Nate just gets on with it.
All right. Well, we're thinking about you, Nate. Hopefully you're dry. Hopefully you're enjoying yourself in Montreal. We hope you've enjoyed the last hour of us breaking down the Canadian Grand Prix for Dalen Cuff, Laurence Edmondson, Katie George, Spencer Hall. I am Gary Striewski. Thank you for spending the last hour with us, and we will see you after the Austrian Grand Prix. Peace.
Garra ring.